The request arrived on a Tuesday, which Danny Reeves would later remember as the day his life became extremely complicated. He was sitting in his small office at the San Diego Zoo, surrounded by research papers and half-empty coffee cups, when his computer chimed with a priority message from the United Nations Extraterrestrial Relations Department. Danny had never received a message from UNERD before. He did not even know they had his email address. The message was simple. Humanity needed a representative for the Galactic Union Cultural Exchange Program. Specifically, they needed someone who understood Earth animals. More specifically, they needed someone who could present a peaceful Earth creature to prove humanity's gentle nature. Danny read the message 3 times. Then he called his supervisor, who confirmed that yes, this was real, and yes, Danny had been selected because he was one of the few wildlife biologists who had also completed the mandatory extraterrestrial contact training last year. 2 weeks later, Danny found himself on a shuttle heading toward the Galactic Union Cultural Exchange Station. The station orbited a small moon in neutral space, serving as a meeting point for dozens of species who wanted to learn about each other without the complications of visiting homeworlds. Danny had spent those 2 weeks researching what other species had presented during previous exchanges. The Sothani, a gentle herbivorous species with large eyes and soft fur, had brought something similar to a butterfly. The Minari had presented a small singing creature that changed colors based on its mood. The Pelox had shown off a fluffy grazer that ate moss and made pleasant humming sounds. The pattern was clear. Everyone brought cute, harmless, decorative creatures. Things that would not scare anyone. Things that would make other species feel comfortable and safe. Danny had a problem with this, that he'd spent his entire career studying Earth animals. He knew better than most people that Earth was not a gentle place. Even the creatures that humans considered peaceful were, by galactic standards, absolutely terrifying. Rabbits could kick hard enough to break bones. Deer killed more people annually than sharks. Swans had been known to drown dogs. There was no such thing as a truly harmless Earth animal. Evolution on a death world did not allow for harmlessness. So Danny made a decision. If he could not bring something genuinely peaceful, he would bring something that represented what peaceful actually meant to humans. Something that did not seek out conflict, but would not run from it either. Something that embodied the stubborn determination that had allowed life on Earth to survive and thrive. He chose a honey badger named Gerald. Gerald had been a resident of the zoo for 6 years. He had arrived as a rescue from an illegal wildlife trade operation, and he had spent every day since then reminding his keepers that captivity was merely a suggestion he chose to tolerate. Gerald had escaped his enclosure 14 times. He had bitten through 3 different types of reinforced fencing. He had once opened a locked door by figuring out how the latch mechanism worked, a feat that had required the zoo to install entirely new security systems. Gerald was not aggressive. He simply did not recognize any obstacle as permanent. The paperwork for transporting Gerald off-planet took longer than the paperwork for transporting Danny himself. There were forms about biological containment, forms about dietary requirements, forms about behavioral warnings. Danny filled out 17 pages explaining that no, the honey badger was not venomous, and yes, the reinforced containment unit was absolutely necessary. When Danny arrived at the station, he was greeted by Ambassador Prill of the Sothani. Prill was about 4 feet tall, covered in soft blue-gray fur, with enormous dark eyes that seemed designed for looking worried. Right now, those eyes were fixed on a large metal container being unloaded from Danny's shuttle. The container was a custom design. 3 layers of reinforced plating surrounded a comfortable habitat space. The outer shell was marked with warning labels in 47 different languages, most of which Danny could not read. Through a small observation window, Gerald could be seen sleeping on a pile of blankets, looking for all the world like a harmless, fuzzy creature. Ambassador Prill moved closer to examine the container. Then the ambassador noticed the scratches on the inside of the titanium alloy walls. Deep scratches. Scratches that suggested something had been testing the strength of the metal with its teeth. "This is your peaceful creature?" Prill asked, voice soft and uncertain. Danny nodded. "His name is Gerald. He is a honey badger. And the containment unit? Standard precaution. Gerald gets bored easily. When he gets bored, he looks for things to do. Usually that means trying to get out of wherever he is. Prill stared at the scratches for a long moment. Has he ever succeeded? 14 times at the zoo, Danny admitted. But this container was designed specifically for him. We reinforced the weak points he usually targets. As if on cue, Gerald woke up from his nap. He stretched, yawned, and began casually chewing on the corner of his blanket. His small eyes, dark and somehow simultaneously innocent and calculating, fixed on the observation window. Prill took a step backward. Danny understood the reaction. Honey badgers had a way of looking at things that suggested they were not seeing an obstacle, but rather a puzzle they had not solved yet. It was a look that said nothing was truly off limits, nothing was truly impossible, and nothing was truly safe from their curiosity. The presentation hall is prepared, Prill said, still watching Gerald with obvious concern. The other species are eager to see what humanity has brought. Danny picked up the container's transport handles. Gerald watched the movement with interest, already examining the seams where the handle brackets connected to the main body. I should warn you, Danny said as they walked toward the presentation hall. Gerald does not perform tricks. He does not follow commands. He does not do anything he does not want to do. Then how do you control him? Danny considered the question carefully. We do not control him. We just try to make sure he wants to do things that will not cause too many problems. Prill's large eyes somehow grew even larger. And if he wants to cause problems, then we get out of his way and wait for him to get bored. They walked in silence after that. Danny could feel the ambassador's nervousness like a physical presence. He knew this was not what the Galactic Union had expected. They had expected something soft and pretty, something that would make humanity seem gentle and civilized. Instead, they were getting Gerald. As they approached the presentation hall, Danny could see other species gathering to watch. They were tall insectoid Kathrani, their exoskeletons gleaming under the station lights. There were flowing Vellani, their bodies constantly shifting between solid and liquid states. There were dozens of others, all curious about what the newest galactic species had brought to share. Gerald pressed his nose against the observation window, studying the crowd with the same intensity they were using to study him. Danny took a deep breath. This was either going to be the best decision of his career or the worst. Given that Gerald had just started testing the window seal with his teeth, Danny was betting on the latter. The biological presentation hall was a massive circular room with tiered seating arranged around a central stage. Soft lighting illuminated display areas where other species had already set up their exhibits. Danny could see the Sothani butterfly creature floating in a glass dome, its wings catching the light like living stained glass. The Minari singing creature trilled softly from its open-air perch, its scales shifting through pleasant shades of blue and green. Everything was beautiful. Everything was delicate. Everything was exactly what the galaxy expected from a cultural exchange. Danny wheeled Gerald's containment unit to humanity's assigned display area and tried not to feel out of place. The crowd murmured as they got their first close look at the container. Danny heard words and languages he did not understand, but the tone was universal. They were confused. Why would anyone put such a small creature in such a heavy container? Ambassador Prill stepped onto the central stage and raised a hand for attention. The murmuring stopped immediately. Fellow delegates, Prill announced, humanity has joined our exchange program with great enthusiasm. Their representative, Danny Reeves, has brought a creature called a honey badger from their homeworld. Please welcome him. Polite sounds of acknowledgement rippled through the crowd. Danny stepped forward, suddenly very aware that he was standing in front of representatives from dozens of alien civilizations, and his only companion was a 30-pound mammal with anger management issues. Thank you, Ambassador, Danny said. I appreciate the opportunity to share a piece of Earth with all of you. He pressed the button that opened the observation panels on Gerald's container. The reinforced glass gave the audience a clear view of the creature inside. Gerald was sitting in the middle of his habitat space, grooming his paws. He looked up at the sudden attention, sniffed the air, and then went back to grooming. He was not impressed by his audience. He was not impressed by anything that a tall Kathrani delegate leaned forward, compound eyes studying Gerald with obvious interest. It appears quite small, the Kathrani observed. Smaller than the Sothani presentation creature. Why does it require such extensive containment? Danny had prepared for this question. Honey badgers are escape artists. Gerald specifically has escaped from 14 different enclosures over the years. The containment is not to protect anyone from Gerald. It is to keep Gerald from wandering off and exploring places he should not explore. Escape artists? Another delegate, a Villani whose body rippled with curiosity, flowed closer to the container. You mean it attempts to flee from captivity? No, Danny said carefully. Fleeing implies fear. Gerald is not afraid of captivity. He simply does not accept it. There is a difference. The Villani paused, its form solidifying slightly as it processed this information. Explain. Danny took a deep breath. This was the part that always confused people who did not understand honey badgers. On Earth, most animals respond to confinement in one of two ways. They either accept it and adapt, or they panic and try to escape through desperation. Gerald does neither. He examines his enclosure, identifies the weakest points, and methodically works to defeat them. Not because he is scared, not because he is unhappy, just because the barrier exists and he has decided it should not. To demonstrate his point, Gerald chose that moment to walk over to one of the container's interior panels and begin scratching at the seam where two sections of metal joined together. His claws made a soft scraping sound against the alloy. He is doing it now, Danny continued. He has been in this container for 3 days. He has already identified 4 potential weak points and is testing them in rotation. The Kathrani delegate made a sound that Danny's translator rendered as impressed acknowledgement. A tactical mind in such a small body. Does it hunt? Honey badgers are omnivores. They eat honey, fruit, insects, small mammals, birds, and occasionally snakes, including venomous ones. The crowd stirred at this. A small delegate from species Danny did not recognize spoke up. It eats creatures that can kill it. Honey badgers have extremely thick, loose skin that makes it difficult for predators to grip them or for venom to reach their vital organs. They also have a remarkable resistance to many types of toxins. On Earth, they have been observed being bitten by highly venomous snakes, passing out from the venom, waking up a few hours later, and then eating the snake that bit them. Silence fell over the presentation hall. Gerald, completely unaware of or indifferent to the effect this information was having, yawned and flopped onto his side for another nap. Ambassador Prill stepped forward, voice slightly higher than before. Perhaps we should clarify. You described this creature as peaceful. How do you define peaceful? Danny had expected this question too. Gerald does not seek out conflict. He does not attack without reason. He does not hunt for sport or pleasure. In that sense, he is completely peaceful. He simply refuses to be intimidated, refuses to back down, and refuses to accept that anything is more dangerous than he is. Because he is confident in his abilities? The Kathrani asked. Because the concept of something being dangerous to him does not exist in his mind. He does not have a threat response because he has never acknowledged the existence of threats. The Kathrani made that impress sound again. Show us. Show us how it behaves when faced with something larger than itself. Danny hesitated. I'm not sure that is a good idea. We wish to understand, the Kathrani insisted. Words describe, but observation teaches. Surely a small demonstration would be safe? The other delegates murmured agreement. They wanted to see this strange creature in action. They wanted to understand what made it different from their gentle, harmless presentation animals. Danny looked at Gerald, who had woken up again and was now watching the crowd with those calculating eyes. Fine, Danny said, but I warned you. He opened a small feeding port on the side of the container and dropped in a rubber ball about the size of Gerald's head. The ball was designed to mimic a potential threat, moving erratically when touched due to its uneven weight distribution. Gerald watched the ball bounce once, twice, 3 times. Then he attacked. There was no threat display, no warning growl, no puffing up to appear larger. Gerald simply launched himself at the ball with a speed that made several delegates flinch backward. He grabbed it in his jaws, shook it violently, and then began systematically tearing it apart. The ball was designed to withstand significant abuse. It was the kind of enrichment toy used for large predators in Earth zoos. Gerald destroyed it in under 2 minutes. When he was done, he sat among the rubber fragments, licked his paws clean, and looked up at the observation window as if waiting for applause. The presentation hall was completely silent. That, Danny said quietly, is what peaceful means on Earth. Not harmless, not gentle, just not looking for trouble. The trouble found Gerald first. Gerald responded. The Kathrani delegate rose to its full height, towering over the other seated observers. We have warriors who train their entire lives to achieve such focus, such commitment. This creature possesses it naturally. Every honey badger does. It is not training. It is simply what they are. Ambassador Prill looked at Danny with an expression that mixed fear and fascination in equal measure. And you said this is a peaceful creature by Earth standards? One of the more peaceful ones, yes. The ambassador's fur rippled in what Danny's translator identified as extreme concern. What do you consider dangerous? Danny thought about grizzly bears, saltwater crocodiles, and the various species of large cats that called Earth home. He thought about box jellyfish and cone snails, and the hundreds of tiny creatures that could kill a human in minutes. Perhaps, he said carefully, we should discuss that another time. Gerald burped, curled up on the destroyed remains of the rubber ball, and went back to sleep. The presentation hall remained silent for a very long time. 3 days after the initial presentation, the Galactic Union Council formally requested a practical demonstration of Gerald's capabilities. They wanted to understand exactly what they were dealing with. Danny stood in the station's enclosed biodome, a massive artificial environment designed to simulate various planetary conditions. Today, it was configured to resemble a temperate forest, complete with artificial streams, dense vegetation, and controlled lighting that mimicked a mild Earth afternoon. Gerald sat in his transport carrier next to Danny, watching the environment through the mesh door with obvious interest. His nose twitched constantly, processing new smells and cataloging them for future reference. Around the biodome's observation deck, representatives from nearly every species on the station had gathered. The Kathrani had brought recording equipment. The Sothani watched from the highest seats, as far from the testing area as possible. Even species Danny had not yet met had come to witness the demonstration. Ambassador Prill stood beside Danny, speaking quietly. The Council wishes to assess the creature's responses to various stimuli. They want to understand how it evaluates threats and makes decisions. Gerald does not evaluate threats, Danny reminded the ambassador. He does not believe in threats. Yes, you have said this. The Council wishes to see proof. A Kathrani technician approached, carrying a small mechanical device about the size of a house cat. This is a standard hunting drone, the technician explained. We use it to test prey animal flight responses. It will approach the subject at increasing speeds and assess how it reacts. Danny looked at the drone, then at Gerald, then back at the drone. I should warn you, Gerald is not a prey animal. All small creatures have prey responses, the technician said confidently. It is basic survival instinct. The drone is programmed to stop before making contact. It simply wants to see how quickly and in which direction your creature flees. Danny sighed. Fina, but do not say I did not warn you. He opened Gerald's carrier. The honey badger stepped out onto the artificial grass, immediately alert and curious. He sniffed the air, examined the nearest tree, and then began a slow, methodical exploration of his new surroundings. The Kathrani technician activated the drone. It rose into the air with a soft hum, its sensors locking onto Gerald's heat signature. Gerald noticed the drone immediately. He stopped walking, turned to face it, and sat down. His small eyes tracked its movement with perfect focus. The drone began its approach, moving slowly at first, then faster. It was designed to simulate a diving predator, the kind of attack that triggered panic responses in most small creatures. Gerald did not panic. Gerald did not run. Gerald waited. When the drone was about 3 feet away, moving at considerable speed, Gerald launched himself off the ground and intercepted it in midair. The collision was spectacular. Gerald's jaws clamped onto the drone's main sensor array. His body twisted, using his weight and momentum to drag the machine down. They hit the ground together, and Gerald immediately began the same systematic destruction he had demonstrated with the rubber ball. The drone's motors whined in protest. Its stabilizers tried to compensate. Emergency protocols attempted to lift it away from the attack. None of it mattered. Gerald had decided the drone was prey, and Gerald's decisions were final. 30 seconds later, the drone was a scattered collection of broken components. Gerald sat among the wreckage, grooming his face as if he had just finished a light snack. The observation deck was absolutely silent. The Kathrani technician stared at the remains of the drone. Danny's translator struggled to convey the full emotional weight of the technician's next words, but the meaning was clear. That drone was worth more than most spacecraft. I did warn you, Danny said. Ambassador Prill moved to the railing, looking down at Gerald with a new kind of respect. It did not flee. It did not even hesitate. Honey badgers do not have a flight response, Danny explained. They only have fight, not because they are aggressive, but because running away simply does not occur to them as an option. The senior Kathrani delegate rose from their seat, compound eyes fixed on Gerald. You say this creature is common on your world? Relatively common in certain regions of Africa and Asia, yes. And your species coexists with them. Carefully, but yes. The delegate made that impressed sound Danny was becoming familiar with. How large do they grow? Is this specimen fully mature? Gerald is an adult male, about average size for his species. Honey badgers typically weigh between 20 and 35 pounds. Another long silence. Danny could practically hear the delegates recalculating their understanding of Earth based on this new information that a Vellani delegate flowed forward, their form rippling with what might have been anxiety or excitement. The hunting drone is designed to trigger instinctive fear responses. Your creature showed none. Is this because it does not experience fear? Danny considered the question carefully. Honey badgers do experience something like caution. They will avoid unnecessary conflict if there is nothing to gain from it. But fear, as we typically define it, the paralyzing response to perceived danger, does not seem to exist in them. They approach every situation with the assumption that they will win, even against larger predators, especially against larger predators. There are documented cases of honey badgers driving lions away from kills, not through strength, but through sheer refusal to back down. Gerald had finished grooming and was now investigating the artificial stream. He stuck his nose into the water, sniffed, and then began pawing at something beneath the surface. What is he doing? Prill asked. Fishing, I think. Honey badgers are curious about everything. If there is food in that stream, he will find it. There were decorative fish in the stream, small alien creatures brought from the Sothani homeworld to add authenticity to the biodome. Gerald caught one almost immediately, examined it with interest, and then ate it. The Sothani delegate made a sound of distress. Those are sacred animals on our world. Gerald does not recognize the concept of sacred, Danny said apologetically. To him, they're just food that was not fast enough. The situation was quickly becoming a diplomatic incident. Danny hurried down to the biodome floor and approached Gerald with a piece of dried fish from his pocket. Gerald, come here, buddy. Leave the alien sacred fish alone. Gerald looked at Danny, looked at the stream, and seemed to weigh his options. Then he accepted the dried fish and allowed Danny to scoop him up. I apologize for the sacred fish, Danny told the assembled delegates. Gerald's dietary preferences are difficult to predict and even harder to control. The senior Kathrani delegate waved one appendage dismissively. The demonstration has been illuminating. This creature operates without social hierarchy, without fear, and without apparent concern for consequences. It simply acts according to its nature. That is accurate, yes. How do humans manage such creatures? How do you prevent them from taking whatever they want? Danny smiled slightly. We do not prevent them. We have learned that trying to stop a honey badger from doing something it wants to do is usually more trouble than it is worth. We redirect them when possible, contain them when necessary, and accept the occasional loss when neither option works. The Kathrani exchanged looks with each other, a complex, silent conversation that Danny could not interpret. Finally, the senior delegate spoke again. Your species has learned to coexist with creatures that cannot be controlled through fear or force. That requires a different kind of strength, a strength of patience and adaptation. Humans are very adaptable, Danny agreed. So we are beginning to understand. Gerald squirmed in Danny's arms, already bored with being held. Danny set him down, and the honey badger immediately returned to the stream to continue fishing. This time, nobody tried to stop him. Word about Gerald spread through the station faster than Danny had anticipated. Within a week, everyone knew about the small Earth creature that had destroyed a military-grade hunting drone without hesitation. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had questions. Danny found himself fielding requests from species he had never heard of, all wanting to learn more about honey badgers and, by extension, about the world that had produced them. The Kathrani were the most persistent. Their delegation requested 3 separate meetings to discuss Gerald's combat capabilities. We would like to know, the senior Kathrani delegate said during their 3rd meeting, if honey badgers can be trained for military purposes. Danny set down his tea, a habit he had developed to give himself thinking time. No, you have not even considered the question. I do not need to consider it. Honey badgers cannot be trained for anything. They do not follow commands. They do not respond to discipline. They do not care about rewards or punishments. They simply do what they want. The Kathrani delegate leaned forward, compound eyes gleaming. Surely with proper conditioning, proper motivation, they could be directed towards specific targets. You are thinking of them like soldiers, Danny explained patiently. They're not soldiers. They're forces of nature. You cannot train a thunderstorm. You cannot give orders to an earthquake. Gerald does not disobey commands because he is rebellious. He disobeys them because the concept of obedience does not exist in his brain. Then how do humans use them? We do not use them. We share a planet with them. There is a significant difference. The Kathrani seemed disappointed but thoughtful. Danny got the impression that they were not giving up on the idea entirely, merely filing it away for future consideration. The Sothani had a different set of concerns. Ambassador Prill invited Danny to a private dinner in the diplomatic quarters, where the ambassador served a variety of herbivorous dishes and asked careful questions about Earth's ecosystem. Your world is very different from ours, Prill said softly. On Soth, the most dangerous creatures are small biting insects that cause mild irritation. We evolved without predators, without competition, without the need for aggression. Earth was not so fortunate, Danny agreed. How do your people live with such constant danger? How do you sleep knowing that creatures like Gerald exist in your forests? Danny thought about how to answer. The truth was that most humans did not think about it much. Danger was simply part of existence. You took precautions, you stayed aware, and you accepted that some things were beyond your control. We adapt, he finally said. We learn which creatures to avoid and how to avoid them. We build shelters. We create tools. And sometimes, when avoidance is not possible, we fight back. With weapons. Sometimes, but more often with stubbornness. Humans are very good at refusing to give up. When something threatens us, we do not just run away. We find ways to make it stop threatening us. Not always through violence. Sometimes through understanding. Sometimes through patience. Sometimes just through being too annoying to bother with. Prill's large eyes blinked slowly. You sound like you're describing a honey badger. Danny laughed. Maybe we're more similar to them than I realized. Meanwhile, Gerald was causing problems of his own. Danny received an urgent message from station security on the 4th day. Gerald had escaped from his containment unit for the 3rd time and was currently loose in the station's central kitchen complex. When Danny arrived, he found chaos. Kitchen staff from 6 different species were standing on counters and tables, watching in horrified fascination as Gerald methodically worked his way through the refrigerated storage units. He just appeared, a trembling Minari cook explained. We do not know how he got in. He walked past the door sensors without triggering them and started eating preserved meats from the Kathrani section. Danny spotted Gerald in the corner, happily chewing on what appeared to be some kind of alien jerky. His fur was slightly damp, suggesting he had squeezed through a ventilation shaft or pipe system to reach the kitchen. "Gerald," Danny said calmly, "time to go back to your room." Gerald looked at him, looked at the jerky, and continued eating. Danny produced a piece of dried fish from his pocket. Gerald's ears perked up. Dried fish was his favorite. That a brief negotiation followed. Danny held out the fish. Gerald considered his options. The jerky was good, but the fish was better. Gerald dropped the jerky and trotted over to collect his prize. Danny scooped him up while he was distracted and tucked him under one arm like a furry, vaguely annoyed football. "I apologize for the disruption," Danny told the kitchen staff. "I will replace whatever he ate." "How'd he get in?" the Minari cook asked. "The security systems should have detected him." Danny examined the ventilation grate near the ceiling. There were fresh scratch marks around its edges. Honey badgers are very good at getting into places they are not supposed to be. They are also very patient. He probably spent 2 days working on that grate before he finally got it open. 2 days? For food. For freedom. The food was just a bonus. Danny carried Gerald back to his containment unit, which was now sporting several new security modifications courtesy of the station's engineering team. They had reinforced the seams Gerald had been targeting. They had added secondary locks to the feeding ports. They had installed motion sensors that would alert Danny if Gerald started any new escape attempts. Gerald was already examining the modifications with interest, clearly treating them as a new puzzle to solve. "You are making me look bad," Danny told him. "The entire galaxy thinks Earth creatures are uncontrollable now." Gerald did not seem concerned about the galaxy's opinion. He found a comfortable spot in his habitat and began grooming his paws that a message arrived from the Villani delegation. They wanted to discuss what Gerald's behavior implied about Earth's evolutionary pressures. Danny agreed to meet them the next morning that a second message arrived from the Kathrani. They had reviewed recordings of Gerald's escape and wanted to know if honey badgers could be used for infiltration purposes. Danny deleted that message without responding that a third message arrived from Ambassador Prill. The council had scheduled a formal hearing to discuss humanity's presentation. They wanted Danny to explain how a creature like Gerald could possibly be considered peaceful. Danny looked at Gerald, who had fallen asleep in a patch of artificial sunlight, looking almost innocent. "You have no idea how much trouble you are causing," Danny said quietly to Gerald's ear twitched. He might have been dreaming about his next escape attempt, or about more alien jerky, or about absolutely nothing at all. With honey badgers, it was impossible to tell. The council chamber was the largest room on the station, a vast circular space with seating arranged in concentric rings around a central speaking platform. Delegates from every species in the Galactic Union had gathered for what was officially called a cultural assessment hearing, but what Danny understood to be a polite interrogation. He stood at the center of the platform, Gerald's containment unit beside him, facing hundreds of alien faces. Some looked curious. Some looked concerned. A few, mostly Kathrani, looked almost eager. Ambassador Prill served as moderator, standing at a podium to Danny's left. "This hearing has been called to assess the cultural implications of humanity's presentation to the exchange program. Specifically, we wish to understand how a creature that destroys military equipment, escapes from secure containment, and shows no apparent fear response can be classified as peaceful." Danny nodded. He had prepared for this. "Before I explain," he said, "I want to acknowledge something. I made a deliberate choice when I selected Gerald for this presentation. I could have brought something else. Earth has many creatures that would have been more comfortable for the galaxy to accept, but I did not think that would be honest." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "Earth is what the galactic classification system calls a Category 5 death world. Our gravity is heavy. Our atmosphere is thick. Our climate is volatile. Our predators are numerous and deadly. Everything that survives on Earth has to be tough, adaptable, and determined. There is no room for softness. No room for creatures that give up easily." He gestured toward Gerald's container. Through the observation window, the honey badger was watching the crowd with his usual calculating attention. Gerald represents what peaceful actually means for life on Earth. Not harmless, not gentle, not weak. Peaceful means choosing not to fight unless necessary. Peaceful means not seeking out conflict. Peaceful means leaving others alone unless they refuse to leave you alone first. A delegate from a species Danny did not recognize raised a limb for attention. But your creature attacked the hunting drone without provocation. The drone was following its programming. It did not intend harm. Gerald did not know that, Danny replied. He saw something moving toward him at speed. He made a decision based on available information. That is not aggression. That is survival instinct. The same instinct that keeps humans alive in a world full of things that want to eat us. You speak of survival, another delegate said. But this creature seems to go beyond survival. It does not simply defend itself. It dominates. Yes, Danny agreed. Because on Earth, defensive postures invite repeated attacks. If you run from a predator, it chases you. If you show weakness, other predators notice. The creatures that survive on Earth are the ones that make threats regret threatening them. Not through aggression, through consequence. The chamber fell silent as the delegates processed this perspective. Danny continued. Humans are the same way. We are friendly. We are curious. We are capable of incredible kindness and generosity. But we did not become the dominant species on our planet by being passive. We became dominant by being impossible to discourage. When we want something, we pursue it until we succeed or until continuing is genuinely impossible. When something threatens us, we find ways to make the threatening stop. You describe a species of predators, a Sothani delegate said quietly. Of killers. I describe survivors, Danny corrected. Killing is sometimes necessary for survival, but is not our first choice. It is not even our preferred choice. We would rather make friends. We would rather trade and cooperate. We would rather find solutions that benefit everyone. But we will not sacrifice ourselves to avoid conflict. We will not let others harm us simply because fighting back might seem rude. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. Gerald does not attack things because he enjoys it. He attacks things that seem like threats because he refuses to be a victim. That is not cruelty. That is dignity. The dignity of a creature that knows its own worth and refuses to let anyone convince it otherwise. The senior Kathrani delegate rose slowly, their exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber lights. You speak of what you call dignity. We Kathrani understand this concept. It is central to our warrior traditions. To refuse submission, to face challenges directly, to accept consequence rather than compromise honor. Exactly, Danny said. Gerald has warrior dignity without warrior culture. He does not fight for glory or status. He fights because the alternative is accepting a threat, and that is simply not something he is capable of doing. And humans share this quality. Danny thought about human history. The wars, yes. The conflicts and the atrocities. But also the resistance movements. The ordinary people who refused to bend to tyrants. The scientists who pursued truth despite persecution. The activists who demanded justice despite personal cost. We try to, he said. We are not always successful. Humans can be cowardly. We can be cruel. We can be petty and vindictive and small. But at our best, when we are faced with something that tries to break us, we respond like Gerald. We refuse. We resist. We find a way to win or we die trying. A long silence followed. Ambassador Prill spoke carefully. You are suggesting that what we perceive as dangerous behavior is actually a form of strength. A strength that humanity values. Yes, on Earth we have a phrase. Honey Badger does not care. It means someone who faces a problem with complete indifference to its difficulty. Someone who does what needs to be done regardless of fear or consequence. It is a compliment, a recognition of admirable determination. Your species admires this creature. We admire what it represents. The refusal to be intimidated. The confidence to face anything. The assumption that no problem is unsolvable if you are stubborn enough. The Kathrani delegate spoke again. I would like to formally request a cultural exchange with Earth. Not to study your weapons or your technology. To study this quality you describe. This mindset that allows survival in impossible conditions. Other delegates murmured in surprised agreement. Danny had not expected this. He had expected criticism, suspicion, maybe even rejection. Instead, he was receiving what sounded like respect. I would be honored to facilitate that exchange, he said carefully. Ambassador Prill raised a hand for order. Before we proceed, I must ask one final question. You have told us about honey badgers. You have told us about human determination. But you have implied that Gerald is one of your more peaceful creatures. So I must know, what do humans consider actually dangerous? Danny thought about his answer for a long moment. Ambassador, on Earth, we have creatures that can kill a human in seconds with a single bite. We have creatures that hunt in coordinated packs with tactical intelligence. We have creatures that are so poisonous that touching them causes death. We have creatures that are larger than this chamber, capable of destroying vehicles and structures without effort. He paused. Gerald is about 30 pounds. He is considered fierce but manageable. He is not even close to the top of Earth's danger scale. The chamber erupted in concerned murmuring. Perhaps, Danny added, we should discuss those creatures another time. After everyone has had a chance to recover from meeting Gerald, Gerald, as if on cue, yawned loudly, displaying teeth that had bitten through military-grade alloys. Ambassador Prill looked at the teeth, then at Danny, then at the teeth again. Yes, the ambassador said weakly. Another time would be acceptable. 1 week after the council hearing, Danny stood in the station's departure bay, preparing to return to Earth. His shuttle waited at the docking port, already loaded with his personal belongings and the considerable documentation that had accumulated during his stay at Gerald's containment unit sat on a cargo platform beside him, newly reinforced after the honey badger's 5th and most ambitious escape attempt. That incident had involved the station's main water recycling system and had required 3 engineering teams to resolve. Danny was not going to miss the emergency repair calls. He was going to miss almost everything else. Ambassador Prill arrived to see him off, accompanied by a small delegation of station officials. The ambassador's large eyes still carried a hint of a nervousness that Gerald seemed to inspire in most herbivorous species, but there was warmth there too. Your visit has been memorable, Prill said. That is not language diplomats use casually. Danny smiled. I apologize for the disruptions. Gerald is not easy to contain. You warned us. We chose not to believe you. A Kathrani delegate approached, moving with the precise efficiency that Danny had come to associate with their species. This was the senior warrior who had expressed such interest in Gerald's mindset during the hearing. The cultural exchange documents have been approved, the Kathrani said. A delegation will arrive on Earth within 3 standard months. We are eager to observe more of your world's creatures and to study this quality you call determination. I will make sure you are met by people who can answer your questions, Danny promised. We have also adopted a new term in our warrior vocabulary. When a Kathrani trainee shows exceptional fearlessness, exceptional refusal to acknowledge difficulty, they will be called honey badger. It is meant as high praise. Danny looked at Gerald, who was chewing on a corner of his blanket with complete contentment. I think Gerald would be honored, if he cared about honors. The Kathrani made a sound that Danny's translator rendered as amusement. Indeed, the highest compliment is to receive praise and remain unaffected by it. A Sothani official approached more cautiously, keeping a safe distance from Gerald's container. We have also sent a formal request to Earth. We would like information about your planet's ecosystem. Specifically, we would like a comprehensive list of creatures that you consider more dangerous than the honey badger. Danny winced slightly. I'm not sure that list exists. There are thousands of species that could qualify depending on the criteria. Thousands? Earth has been producing predators for billions of years. We have gotten very good at it. The Sothani official made a sound of distress and hurried away to record this information. Danny suspected that Earth was about to receive a great many cautious diplomatic inquiries. Ambassador Prill stepped closer, voice lowered for relative privacy. May I speak honestly, Danny? Of course. When you first arrived, I was afraid of you. Not of Gerald specifically, but of what he represented. A world that could produce such creatures seemed inherently dangerous. A species that could coexist with them seemed unknowable. I wondered if humanity was truly safe to interact with. And now I understand that I was asking the wrong question. The question is not whether humanity is safe. Nothing that survives in a hostile universe is truly safe. The question is whether humanity is trustworthy, whether your strength will be used for protection rather than destruction. Prill's large eyes met Danny's directly. I believe it will be a species that honors determination, that values survival without cruelty, that brings a honey badger to a cultural exchange and calls it peaceful. That is a species I want to know better. Danny felt something warm settle in his chest. He had come to this station expecting to be judged. Instead, he had found understanding. Thank you, Ambassador. That means more than you know. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the controlled chaos of the departure bay. Ships came and went. Species mixed and separated. The vast machine of galactic civilization continued its endless motion. There is one more thing, Prill said suddenly. Several species have expressed concern about your next presentation. The rumor is that someone has proposed bringing a creature called a cassowary. Danny groaned. That was a joke. I think it was a joke. I hope it was a joke. What is a cassowary? A large bird. Very large, with a blade on its head and claws that could disembowel a human with a single kick. Prill stared at him for a long moment. A bird. Birds on Earth are descended from dinosaurs. They inherited certain attitudes. And this is different from a honey badger how. The cassowary is much larger and actively dislikes everything. Gerald is indifferent. There is a meaningful distinction. Prill's fur rippled in a pattern Danny had learned to recognize as barely contained anxiety. I believe I will recommend that future Earth presentations receive additional review before approval. That is probably wise. Danny's shuttle signaled readiness for departure. He gathered Gerald's containment unit and secured it to the transport trolley, making sure all the new locks were properly engaged. Gerald watched him work with calm interest, already examining the seams of his improved prison. Somewhere in that small, fearless brain, he was probably planning his next escape. Take care, Ambassador, Danny said. I hope we will meet again. As do I. Safe travels, Danny Reeves. And please, tell your people that the galaxy has noticed them. For better or worse, Earth is no longer unknown. Danny smiled. I think that was always inevitable. We are not good at staying hidden. Neither is Gerald. They both looked at the honey badger, who had begun methodically scratching at a ventilation grate in his container. The scratching was slow, patient, and absolutely confident. Danny laughed. No, he really is not. He wheeled Gerald's container onto the shuttle, secured it in the cargo area, and took his seat in the passenger cabin. Through the viewport, he could see Ambassador Prill watching from the departure bay, one hand raised in farewell. The shuttle lifted off, carrying Danny and Gerald away from the station and toward home. Behind them, the Galactic Union began the long process of understanding Earth. Scientists requested data on planetary conditions. Warriors studied recordings of Gerald's behavior. Diplomats drafted protocols for future human interactions. And somewhere in the Kathrani training academies, young warriors began competing to earn the title that had once belonged to a small, fearless creature from a distant death world. Honey Badger. The highest compliment a Kathrani could receive, not because it meant strength or skill or victory, but because it meant something simpler and more profound. IT meant refusing to give up. IT meant facing everything with the unshakable assumption that nothing was impossible. IT meant being too stubborn to acknowledge defeat. Danny looked back at Gerald, who had fallen asleep in his container, exhausted from the effort of testing security measures. You did good, buddy, Danny said quietly. You show them what Earth is really like. Gerald did not respond. He was dreaming, probably about escape routes, or alien fish, or the endless possibility of a universe full of things to investigate. Danny settled back in his seat and watched the stars streak past. Earth was waiting. And somewhere in the future, the galaxy was going to learn a lot more about the strange, stubborn, impossibly determined species that called it home. Danny could not wait to see their faces when they met a wolverine.